The year was 2007, the race was Brazilian Grand Prix, and we had Kimi Raikkonen winning the World Championship in his very first season with Ferrari. That was 2007, and we are in 2025 right now. It's been 18 years since Ferrari has won a championship. Now let's go back even further. The year is 2000, the race is the Japanese Grand Prix, and Michael Schumacher wins the championship and ends a 21-year drought for Ferrari. Now, Ferrari is arguably the most iconic team in Formula One. It is also the most successful. What has led to Ferrari going decades without winning a championship? And what has led to this team not being as successful in the last 50 years? So let's talk about it, as in this video, I try to explain how in modern day F1 you can be successful if there is a certain framework that teams follow to ultimately be successful in Formula One. Then I talk about why Ferrari does not fit that criteria and why ultimately, if I'm talking about the current Ferrari setup, I don't see it becoming successful in the short term. So let's jump into it. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the framework that teams tend to follow in modern day Formula One to ultimately be successful. Now, when we're talking about the framework, it tends to begin with hiring a capable leader. Now, when we talk about a capable leader, it is someone who knows what it takes to become successful in Formula One, someone who has been in motorsport for a while, or someone who has, for the lack of a better word, minerals to be successful. When we talk about Christian Horner, he falls in that category. Jean Todt, he falls in that category. To a certain extent, Andreas Seidel, Andreas Stella, Ron Dennis, Toto Wolff, Ross Brawn, these are the names. They tend to be successful because they know what it takes to ultimately reach that level of prominence and success in the sport. Once you've hired the right person, the next thing that you need to do is provide him the apt number of resources. Now, one of the major issues that happens with a lot of teams is, fine, you've got the right people, but if you're not going to provide the right number of investments, it's not going to work out. Now, when I talk about the right number of investments, let me make one thing very clear. I'm not saying that money buys success in Formula One. I think Toyota is one of the biggest examples of money not buying success in Formula One. With that being said, you need to hit at least a minimal threshold for the team to ultimately be successful. And that is the minimal number that is required to have the right infrastructure, the right people, the right tools, and everything ultimately under the same roof. That's what you need. Now, once that is taken care of, the third thing that you need to do, you need to hire a driver that is capable enough of getting the best out of the car. In every grid, there are going to be at least 3, 4, 5 drivers that are probably belonging in that top 3, top 5 category that are capable of getting the best out of any F1 car on the grid. Try to target one of them and get them on board. Ferrari did that with Michael Schumacher in the past. Then you had Mika Hakkinen for McLaren. You have Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. You had Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen at Red Bull, and Fernando Alonso at Renault. So that's one of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that you try to fit into place. Now, once that is done, I think probably the most important thing that a lot of team bosses or the people that are actually managing the team, they forget is you need to have patience and you need to have a lot of it. But one of the bigger issues with Formula One is the lead times are long. The changes you make today, they're going to take years before ultimately you can see their fruit. And that is something, it's very hard to understand. It is something that is very hard to relate to any other sport. So that's where it becomes very hard for the people that manage a team to understand that you need to give things time to ultimately iron out the issues, get things in order, work as a group, and everything should gel together, and it takes a lot of time. So if you are ultimately managing a team, after you've got a team boss in place, you've got the funding in place, you've got the right driver, you need to wait. You need to give them a lot of time before they ultimately start clicking together. And finally, and probably one of the more important things, if you have to have a sustained success in Formula One, you need to keep politics out of the door. I think that is very important because that is one area which is, it's a distraction, but it's also one of the bigger causes of why teams fall apart. If you have any case of a succession battle within the team, there's a power struggle, there's anything where the team is essentially not working as a group and is not aligned in their goals, I think that team is not going to win. And if ultimately you're managing a team, you cannot let that fester. And politics, for the most part, if you want to be successful in Formula One, politics has to be kept out of the door. 100% focus has to be on winning and has to be on bringing the team to the top. If that focus is even 5% distracted, you're not going to have a sustained success. Just look at Red Bull, how it has declined. It has entirely declined due to the political battle. So this framework, essentially, it is basically some of the points that almost all the teams that have succeeded in Formula One in the last 2 to 3 decades, they followed. Now let's take a look at why Ferrari, as a team, it goes decades without winning. Now, first of all, when we talk about Ferrari, we have to understand that the team is run by a board. Even in the current setup that we have Ferrari chairman John Elkann at the top, and he has the Ferrari CEO Benedetto Vigna next to him. And these are two powerful personalities that tend to take decisions which are, I'm not going to say that they are the right ones most of the time, but they are decisions that are taken at a whim. And in essence, this is a symptom of a bigger problem, and the bigger problem is with how boards tend to take these calls. Now, the problem with boards taking these calls is, first of all, they don't know how to run a team in Formula One. Running a successful operation in Formula One requires a lot of resolve, patience, knowledge, and understanding of the sport, and the boards tend not to have that. That's why you tend to see Ferrari making calls which you would ideally see in a football club. It reminisces those kind of calls, and what works in football, it is essentially not going to work in Formula One. And that is something that is a bit of a trickle down knowledge that they tend to not have. Now, next up is impatience. Now, when we talk about impatience, I think there are a couple of stats that I'll show you that will show how bad the situation is at Ferrari. Now, the first stat is, when we talk about Red Bull, it came to Formula One in 2005 and it had Christian Horner as its team principal. Christian Horner remained team principal for 2 decades until 2025. That's around a 21-year period. In that period, Red Bull won 15 championships, and it is one of the top two teams in that particular period. In that same period, Ferrari has had 6 different team bosses. First, it was Jean Todt. He was replaced by Stefano Domenicali. Then we had Marco Mattiacci. Then we had Maurizio Arrivabene. Then he was followed by Mattia Binotto. And currently we have Fred Vasseur, who might get replaced soon. That's the situation at Ferrari. You can even compare it with Mercedes, which is the second stat. Mercedes, since 2010, its inception, has had 2 principals, which is Ross Brawn and Toto Wolff. And that's it. And that should tell you everything about how you have to be successful in Formula One. Impatience and changing team bosses every few years is not going to cut it. But that's how Ferrari goes about things. Then we have the politics and interference. Now let's get one thing straight. Ferrari is a political mess most of the times. There's far too many things that distract a driver or a team boss within a team. This was a feature in 2018 when Sebastian Vettel was fighting Lewis Hamilton for the championship. This was a feature in 2006 when ultimately the dream team was broken and Michael Schumacher retired. Why? Because Luca Di Montezemolo wanted Kimi Raikkonen at Ferrari. That should tell you everything about how Ferrari goes about things. To add to all of this, you have to question the quality of team leaders that Ferrari has chosen. Mattia Binotto was a brilliant technician. Maurizio Arrivabene did not have any experience managing F1 teams or motorsport teams in general. Fred Vasseur, yes, he's a brilliant choice, but he needs to be given time. And that's where the problem lies when it comes to Ferrari. Either you've picked team personnel that are not capable of bringing the team to the top, or you've not given them enough time and resources to ultimately reach a point where you can say, okay, fine, the experiment is done, this is not going to work out. And that's where the problem lies. Even as we look at the framework that I talked about earlier, if Ferrari has to succeed, at least some of the points need to be ticked. And that just does not happen when we talk about how Ferrari is run and how it has been run for decades now. In essence, if you have to talk about why Ferrari doesn't win, all you need to do is take a look at the last 4 or 5 decades and you take a look at how many times the Ferrari team structure has been able to conform to the framework that I had suggested earlier. It is a team that's run by a board that doesn't know how to succeed in Formula One. It lacks patience. Even if it brings the right personnel, it doesn't give them the right environment to succeed. And finally, just the politics of it all. That's not a combination that becomes successful in Formula One, and that is where Ferrari tends to fall apart. Now, when I talk about the current Ferrari setup, the problem is that the issues that I've already talked about, these issues are still present in the current Ferrari setup. The team principal, Fred Vasseur, he's not being given a longer leash. This is the first season he's struggling and already they're going after his head. And then you can talk about other things like a lack of patience. That's pretty common with John Elkann. You also talk about how there's an environment of fear that exists because first mistake and you're gone. That's the kind of attitude that there is at Ferrari, and that doesn't work in any which way. So yeah, when I'm talking about Ferrari and how it has not succeeded in the past and how I don't see it succeeding at least in the short term, I just don't see a concrete plan and a structure in place that can help this team to ultimately reach the goal of being a world champion. Maybe that is why they are looking at Christian Horner now, but even if Ferrari wants Christian Horner, he needs to be given a longer leash. He needs to be given the independence to express himself and let him do the things the way he wants. if Ferrari wants Christian Horner to come to the Ferrari culture and act like Ferrari and be Ferrari, Ferrari is not going to win. That's the bottom line. And that's the reason why in the last 50 odd years, if you remove the Michael Schumacher stint, Ferrari might not even be the most successful team in F1 history. So yeah, that's my take on the whole thing. If you guys liked the video, thanks, drop a comment, and most importantly, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.